Welcome to the Wednesday stream. I hope everyone's having an awesome Wednesday morning. I see a lot of wonderful folks in chat. How's it going, Danarchus, Kal-El, Renardus, Astro B London, how's it going? Winter indeed is coming. My landlords just turned on the heat. Nice. How generous of them. How generous of them. Was it too much for, was it too much of an ask for them to have running water too? I'm guessing it's not Monday. I guess it's not morning in London right now. True. I have no idea actually. Late legally? Wait, there's like a time frame on that? I mean, like, why isn't that just like a thing? Why isn't that like a default setting? What? In New York City, there's like a date? Yikes. That's kind of weird. Can you imagine? Can you imagine here in, like, for example, in like South Florida, there's like, oh yeah, hold on. There's a date when you need to turn on the air conditioning. I unironically think there would be like riots. That's just not possible. What's on the agenda? We do have a few headlines to go through, and I still wanted to finish that Jose video, which looks pretty good actually. Let me start bringing some of that up. Also, lots of interesting developments when it comes to January 6th. And correcting the record about a claim that I'm glad that I didn't just jump on it without waiting for, you know, further elaboration or further investigation to happen. So I'm glad I waited on that. Not sure they live downstairs. How are they not cold? Jeez. October 1st is the date to turn on. Yikes. I still, that still blows my mind. That's like saying like, oh yeah, the first day of summer is when you need to make sure that the AC is on. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. That legitimately makes no sense. Alright, let me get that video going up here. Alright. This one was posted by Darknet in the Discord. Imagine holding a conference about our last chance on the climate crisis and the only exposure animal agriculture gets, it's on the effing menu. Hey, here's a nice hypocrisy. COP26 is an effing joke. Send it to me via whispers. Not good at retaining heat, but cheap rent for here. Yikes. Anywhere in New York City, I suspect it's very expensive, regardless of the, quote, cheap rent. Our standard beef burger would have produced 5.1 kilograms of CO2 by reducing the meat content. We have reduced it to 1.8 kilograms. Or, and hear me out, or you could have figured out a way to minimize that altogether. Cheap rent is difficult to come by. Oof. Right, clean coal. Yeah, it's the same concept as clean coal. It's the same concept as clean coal. Right, they probably shouldn't be serving beef at a climate conference, just saying. Exactly.
Wait a minute, I want a woman. I want a woman. A woman. A woman.
What?
Gender equality here. Maybe I don't. Let's see.
Abby Martin with the Empire Files. Speaker Pelosi, you just presided over a large increase in the Pentagon budget. This Pentagon budget is already massive. The Pentagon is a larger polluter than 140 countries combined.
True.
How can we seriously talk about net zero if there is this bipartisan consensus to constantly expand this large contributor to climate change,
True.
which is exempt from these conferences?
True.
Military is exempt from climate talks.
Well, I just want to use an example if I can.
Nah. That question was for Speaker Pelosi. No.
Ken, you know the sea level rise is an important part of what's happening to the climate. And I am not a defense person, but I've had so many talks with the Defense Department, with the Navy in particular, about how they have to respond to what's going on. So I really do think that there is no reason why what we're putting together, with Build Back Better and other things, can't respond to the Defense Department and have the same impact in terms of reducing emissions.
I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, but here are words. I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, but here are words. I mean, they are words. They were in English.
And I do think that the Defense Department is very much aware of the fact that they have to play a major role, both from a strategic as well as, for the good of the world. So
for the good of the world? Really? Really? For the good, so you're gonna reorganize priorities and repurpose a lot of what the Defense Department does to help alleviate the situation with climate change, right? You're gonna make sure that they reduce their emissions. They're gonna make sure that they play their part in making sure that other countries are able to also access resources and things like that. Use like the Army Corps of Engineers, things like that to help build green infrastructure, right? That's what you mean?
I don't see what we're doing in any way, or increasing the defense budget, as being something that's inconsistent with climate action. I really don't.
How can you not? Wait, am I missing something here? How can you not? If you increase the budget for the defense, right? And do not indicate the priorities of said budget, you just keep it business as usual, then how can you not see the connection there? If you know that the military has a massive footprint, and you continue to allocate hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, I'll use their type of rhetoric, 9 trillion in comparison to the 1.75 trillion that we're now at with the Build Back Better plan. 9 trillion. And none of that is reorganizing, restructuring, repurposing those additional funds or those defense budgets to maybe reduce the carbon footprint, or to reorganize maybe how we do things overseas. Maybe, for example, we should be using the Army Corps of Engineers to start using that as a method of building green infrastructure in other places. I don't know. Is that what's happening? Probably not. How tone deaf are these people? It's just like right over their head. Unless it's on purpose. Hey Thandera, how's it going? The Pentagon would be 48th if it was a country. Interesting. Not surprised. Our military is massive. And just to be clear, this is a non-answer. He's just saying things. This is a non-answer. And it wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Speaker Pelosi, who is the one who holds the gavel right now. She's the one that holds the gavel as Speaker of the House.
And may I just add that the national security advisors all tell us that the climate crisis is a national security matter.
Okay. Yes, that is true. But that doesn't mean allocate billions and billions of dollars without changing the way things operate. It was one thing. It would be one thing if you're adding money to the defense budget if it was for the purposes of, like I said, I don't know, an example would be funding more Army Corps of Engineers for building projects for green energy. Okay, fine. But that's not, to my knowledge, what's happening. To my knowledge, that's not really what's happening, unless you can show me otherwise. I mean, right, they're saying one thing and doing another. Right, which is like her excuse. So what it sounds like to me, it's like, oh yeah, we understand that climate change is actually a very, very it's very threatening to national security for obvious reasons. Food security is national security issues. The fact that we will have water scarcity, which is already a thing, but not necessarily on a countrywide scale, but it is a problem already. That might be a thing of national security. The fact that our coasts are getting destroyed consistently is a threat to our national security, according to them. So they say that is the excuse as to why we're allocating this budget to it. Except, it's not going to address any of these issues. Those funds aren't going to address any of these issues. It would be one thing if it was, but it's not.
It is, of course, a health matter for our children, the water they drink, the air they breathe, etc. It is a jobs issue between clean technologies being the future of our world.
All of these things are true. All of these things are true. But holy, do something, okay? All of these things are true. So do something about it.
Workforce and the training for all of that. It is a national security issue because of the all of the conditions that climate crisis produces. I won't go into all of them, but they are cause for migration, conflict over habitat and resources, and again.
So you understand what the ramifications mean if you do not take action. So that's the thing. They understand the consequences of not taking action, and yet things that we've been talking about in this channel for quite some time now, for months and months and months and months and months, especially since the IPCC report came out and we just kind of started hitting it really hard. We understand this, right? We understand that not taking action to solve the climate change crisis is not just a matter of, oh yeah, like things are gonna be hot, or we just get extra summers, or yeah, I guess like hurricanes might be a little bigger. It's not just that. It's the reality of food scarcity, water scarcity, land scarcity on the coast, where hundreds of millions of people will be displaced like that. And then what? And then what? These things tend to pave paths for conflict. And she's understanding that. She's just admitting on the world stage that she understands. She understands the consequences of not solving this problem. And yet, we're having problems getting any meaningful steps forward. Hey, Kinetic Moz. The DoD produces a sustainability report every year. I did not know that. Are the people in Florida, especially coastal Florida, worried about rising sea levels caused by climate change? No, it hasn't hit us yet. It hasn't hit us as a whole, despite the multiple reports that continue to come out, I believe as a whole, the Floridians aren't really grasping it. It hasn't hit. The reality hasn't really hit yet. And when it does, when it does, oh man, is that gonna be a time?
And a security challenge globally, and then the fourth, of course, the moral issue that we need to pass on this planet to future generations in a responsible way. Now, recognizing what you said, we recognize that as well. And a big user of fuel, there have been many initiatives over time, more successful with more technology, to convert from fossil fuel to other sources of fuel.
Okay.
To run the military. Because
awesome. Where are these plans? What exactly are you doing about it? Right, just sell your house, bro. It's all good. They spread it forward. Yeah, the reality is once it starts to hit, once reality hits in the coastal areas, especially coastal areas like Florida, which will be, in my opinion, ground zero for the East Coast anyways, when it comes to rising sea levels, climate change induced hurricanes. When it comes to that, when people start realizing what the situation is, they're going to panic and attempt to mass sell or mass leave. The problem being is that by the time they realize that, it's already too late. Who are you going to sell that house to? How much is that house gonna suddenly be worth, right? How much is that house suddenly gonna be worth? It's just gonna Thanos snap to nothing, because who's gonna buy it? The question is, are they gonna let millions die? Ha! Probably. Depends on their inaction. Hold the government accountable? Nah, we champion personal responsibility around here. The main issue is the use of aviation fuel for its aircraft and bunker fuel for its ships. It has made good progress with vehicles with EV and hybrids, but it needs to solve the problem of the first two issues. True. Among other things as well. Kinetic pause.
Because it would make the biggest difference. Transportation, defense, these are two of the biggest, that can make the biggest difference in all of that. And that is something we're very, very focused on. As I say, the Defense Department sees this systemically, that we have to stop it as a national security issue. And one way to do that is to stop our dependence on fossil fuels, which exacerbate the climate crisis.
Yes, but what are you doing about it? Yeah, all true. All true. But what are you doing about it? Hey Heat, how's it going? Where are my camels at? Oh. Sorry to disappoint you, but there will be no camels on stream today. I apologize. I was at a drive-thru and counted 15 semis passing on the freeway in less than 2 minutes. That's a lot of trucks on the road, a lot of gas being consumed. That's true. But even then, that's not really that's nothing in comparison to like what other industries are emitting. But hey, if we can move away from fossil fuels in as many ways as possible, then we should be doing that. Period. Full stop.
With that, I thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, they're telling us they have to clean the room. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so basically,
If you sleep on your side,
whoa.
I bet you hate your...
Why would it transition into a Tucker segment?
To Virginia to get his old friend Terry McAuliffe. So Barack Obama went to Virginia to get his old friend Terry McAuliffe elected governor. That didn't work well.
King Obama? What?
So he split, he fueled up his private jet, and he flew to Glasgow, Scotland. And while he was there, he immediately started slinging the cliches. Our genius president speaks almost entirely in cliches, which is what dumb people do. That's how you know. Here's what he said.
Oh man. Oh no, Tucker, self-report. Oh no. Oh no, Tucker. That's oof, yikes. That's a bit of a that's a self-report. Hey Mayo Monkey, how's it going? It would be good to show the pie chart of proportions of climate change contributors. Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty clear on who the biggest emitters are. YouTube is a white supremacist platform. I thought everyone knew that. Yeah, I think that's my fault because unfortunately, we have to cover Tucker from time to time here, so my recommendations are kind of messed up. To be fair, if you guys saw Dylan Burns' stream last night, he literally got an ad for all intents and purposes, and this is completely approved by YouTube, by the way. Completely approved, Danarchist, to your point. For all intents and purposes, a great replacement ad. An ad for stream snippets of a channel that does great replacement rhetoric. But hey, as long as YouTube gets the bucks, they don't care what they advertise. I still want to know what Obama's threat to voters are.
Since we're in the Emerald Isles here, he said, let me quote the bard, William Shakespeare. First of all, Emerald Isle refers, of course, to Ireland, not to Scotland. Scotland is not an isle anyway, and Shakespeare is the national bard of England, not of Scotland. That's the Scots, but whatever. More cliches heaped upon one another. The real point of Obama showing up was to remind everyone that there was a silver lining they got to hear from him. Jesus is here. Watch.
Even though I'm not required to attend summits like this anymore, old habits die hard. And when the issue at hand is the health of our planet and the world our children and our grandchildren will inherit, then you will have a hard time keeping me away. Because when it comes to climate, time really is running out.
Yeah, cool, except you had all the time in the world to do something and you did nothing. I don't need to hear anymore. When I was like in 2016, I was a junior and I remember thinking how childish Fox News was, and now I'm just desensitized. Yeah. He was reviewing white replacement theory, saying whites are oppressed minorities. Yeah, exactly. If you were there, Astro, yeah, that's exactly what the ad was. The ad was for a channel to espouse this kind of stuff, and apparently that was completely approved by YouTube. So yeah, what it looked like to me, from what I was watching, just like in the background, it looked like snippets of live streams, of a live stream type of channel that espouses these type of things. Exactly, Astro. He sounds more like a madman than his usual at this speed. Yeah, I just wanted to take a quick peek at what he was complaining about, but yeah. At today's thing that you need to be angry about. And of course, when you can't find anything else to be angry about, you throw in Obama. You throw in Obama. Actually, HR showed a white MAGA resource. Yikes. Actually, he showed a white MAGA resource. Yeah. Yep. Anyways, nice meme. Nice meme on Cope26. Putting really putting the icing on the cake. Not only was there over 500 representatives or lobbyists of the fossil fuel industry. I think the actual tally was just over 500. I think it was like 503. Not only were all these folks there, but you had an entire section for people like Jeff Bezos. I mean, why? Why? This is exactly why climate activists and people like climate activists like Greta Thunberg said this is just a PR stunt. This is literally just a PR stunt. Imagine attempting to be serious about climate change and somehow allow over 500 lobbyists or adjacent folks from the fossil fuel industry. Imagine the majority of these folks flew in with private jets. No attempt to show any seriousness about addressing the climate crisis at all. Hey, Dakapolion, how's it going? Morning. Anyways, folks, so yes, here, the reason why is because I want to show this video, and this video is pretty great. It really does show us a great breakdown, because I think that it's like incredibly toxic, just how popular this guy is, and just how on the surface, so many people just really, this is the type of ad. Is this like a new Da Vinci Code? Anyways, how toxic this guy is.
Tucker Carlson hosts the most popular cable news show on television. His most recent ratings show, he averaged 3.2 million viewers a night on Fox News with his Tucker Carlson Tonight program. It debuted on November 14th, 2016, originally at 7 p.m., but following the cancellation of The O'Reilly Factor, Tucker inherited the 8 p.m. time slot in 2017. The show grew in popularity, topping out at 4.33 million viewers in the second quarter of 2020.
Yeah, it wasn't a serious conference,
the most viewers
the
ever
seriousness
for a
of
cable
climate
news program
change,
in the
correct.
United States. The show proved so popular that Fox News expanded its relationship with Tucker Carlson in the spring of 2021 by giving him a morning show, Tucker Carlson Today, that airs 3 times a week, and Tucker Carlson Originals, which airs once a month, both of these appearing on the Fox Nation streaming platform. If you're not familiar with who Tucker Carlson is, a very brief recap is that he lived a middle-class life as a child until his father married into the wealthy Swanson family, whose fortune come from those frozen TV dinners. His privileged life led him to a career in journalism, where he wrote for a few conservative outlets. In 2000, he worked at CNN on a show called Crossfire. This show ended when he was embarrassed by Jon Stewart on camera and
Yeah, exactly, Astro. That's what, that's the ad that I was talking about.
Carlson did not renew his CNN contract. He then spent some time at PBS, had a show on MSNBC for a few years, before finally finding a home at Fox News in 2009, where he was eventually given his own show in 2017. If you want more details about the history of Tucker Carlson, I highly recommend this recap of his life from Some More News. With all this Tucker Carlson content on offer, I decided to consume a whole week's worth of his stuff to get an idea of what it's like to be in the Tucker Carlson audience, and what it feels like to get the full effect of his work. This is for the week of October 18th, 2021.
Now, off to the Garden of Madness.
The first part of every episode of Tucker Carlson Tonight is the feature story, typically ranging from 15 to 20 minutes. It makes up half of each episode and is usually the part that has everyone buzzing the next day. These feature stories are largely centered around a monologue where Carlson builds his case, and they're capped off with a brief interview. The October 18th edition of the show offers a great example. It began with the recent passing of former United States Secretary of State Colin Powell.
Unlike other people in Washington, Colin Powell got where he was on merit, and that was inspiring to watch.
And eventually it turned into a rant about how Americans are living in a medical apartheid state.
We have a division, medical apartheid. We have rules, but some people have exempted themselves from the rules, and they're not ashamed of it.
Here's how he made the jump. The crucial step in drawing a connection between Powell's death and this authoritarian nightmare is that Powell died of complications related to COVID-19, even though he had been vaccinated. Once this connection is made, 2 minutes into this 14-minute segment, it stops being about Powell entirely.
Like almost everyone his age, Colin Powell was fully vaccinated against COVID. And yet, according to his family and doctors, Colin Powell died of COVID. Of course, that fact does not make his death any less sad, nor is it unusual. Many thousands of vaccinated Americans have died of COVID. Former CDC Director Robert Redfield announced just today that about 40% of all recent COVID deaths in the state of Maryland, for example, are among those who have had both shots.
Yeah, so can anybody tell me what the problem with that is? Can anybody tell me what the problem with citing that statistic, if it is even true, is? See, the thing with statistics is numbers don't lie, but I can make them say what I want them to say. When you zoom in, so zoomed in that you choose a specific area and then cite that specific zoomed in area to avoid, of course, taking the broader look at everything, then yeah, of course, you can paint that picture by zooming in. What's toxic about it? Well, I don't know if you were watching that, so I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt. But it turns out that it just means white nationalism. It's just a channel to push white nationalist, great replacement rhetoric. Mayo monkey. The feature story has to be at the beginning so his viewers don't fall asleep before getting to it. True.
Is a deeply deceptive stat. Looking at Maryland alone, the 8th most vaccinated state, with, at the time of writing, 65.8% of its population being fully vaccinated. This would mean that breakthrough cases, that is, cases of vaccinated people suffering from COVID, would be more common because such a large percentage of the state is fully vaccinated.
The State Department of Health agrees, writing in a statement, as the number of our residents who are vaccinated continues to increase, we expect to see an increase in the proportion of COVID-related deaths occurring in vaccinated individuals. Many of these deaths are linked to comorbidities that make patients more vulnerable.
Even on its face, though, if most people are fully vaccinated and the majority of deaths are still attributed to the unvaccinated, it seems like getting a vaccine is a good idea. A wide review of the numbers available from the CDC reveals that COVID deaths are dramatically more common among the unvaccinated.
Right, so when you zoom out and actually look at the broad sense of things, then yeah, you would know these things. But Tucker is not interested in that.
Vaccinated being 11 times more likely to die of COVID than the vaccinated.
That's right.
Powell's death is an anecdote, a high-profile case of something that isn't terribly common. It's being used to push a narrative about skepticism towards the vaccine. It's all a pretense to get to the real message of the segment.
What tells you you've been lied to. Vaccines may be highly useful for some people, but across a population, they do not solve COVID.
The language here is crucial. What does solve COVID even mean? That a vaccine will completely eliminate it? Vaccines rarely eradicate illnesses, with the only transmissible one among humans that has been wiped out so far being smallpox. The vague usage of solve and how it will never be achieved is how Carlson can imply that the vaccine really isn't worth getting, at least for most people, without outright denying it has any significant effect at all. His earlier statement implies that it's a very narrow effect.
Vaccines may be highly useful for some people.
The COVID vaccine has been demonstrated to dramatically reduce one's chance of death, but the number of deaths aren't the only talking point Carlson uses. Carlson also says the vaccine doesn't effectively slow the spread of COVID. This also isn't true. Craig Spencer, an emergency medicine physician and director of global health and emergency medicine at New York Presbyterian Columbia University Medical Center, writing for The Atlantic, said, "To spread the coronavirus, you have to have the coronavirus. And vaccinated people are far less likely to have the coronavirus, period." Even in instances of breakthrough cases where a vaccinated person is infected with the Delta variant of COVID, preliminary data shows that transmission is reduced by 63%, albeit for a period of a few months. For the Alpha variant of COVID, transmission is even more greatly reduced by a vaccine, increasing to 73%. A lot of this data is still being peer-reviewed, but so far the majority of the science seems to be saying the exact opposite of what Tucker Carlson is asserting. But he doesn't say any of it in an attempt to accurately discuss the science of the day. It's all a guise to get to what he really wants to talk about. President Biden is demanding obedience, and people are fearfully obeying him.
They're afraid of you. They can't explain why they're afraid of you. The president told them that you are dangerous, and so they're afraid. The question is, over time, what does that do to your most cherished relationships, to your friendship, to your family relationships? What does it do to the country?
The Biden administration is, apparently, using the pandemic to destroy American families, or as Tucker would put it.
America has once again become what it was when Colin Powell got his commission in the Army. America has become segregated, not between black and white, but between vaccinated and unvaccinated.
This is how Tucker creates the illusion of a coherent narrative. Colin Powell being alive during segregation is purely incidental, and segregation itself was a deliberate attempt to restrict black people from positions of power and influence within American society because of the color of their skin, which is hardly the same as not letting someone who is far more likely to carry an infectious disease eat at an Applebee's. But what makes Tucker Carlson particularly effective is that he isn't just spreading partisan talking points. His monologues also...
Yes, we watched parts of this yesterday, but we didn't get to finish, so that's why I'm kind of like restarting it for folks. I sometimes wonder how many 60-plus-year-old Fox viewers died from being discouraged from participating in public health measures. It will never be known, I think, because, I mean, how would you know? The good news is that despite this, the majority of elderly folks... No, it's not deja vu. Or maybe it is? No, I'm kidding. The good news, then, Dara, is that the overwhelming majority of older folks are vaccinated completely. They are one of the most vaccinated groups. So, I mean, I'm sure there's holdouts because of rhetoric like this, but thankfully it's just in the minority.
Include a healthy dose of conspiracy theories.
This is a pandemic of the Chinese government, born in a lab in Wuhan and brought here, either
Okay.
accidentally or not. That's the fact of it.
This is also not a fact. The current state of the debate, according to an article in The New Yorker, is that there is no conclusive evidence to support that claim, and most scientists who study viruses are inclined to say it was a naturally occurring virus. The most plausible version of this theory is that it was being studied at this lab and was accidentally leaked because of a lack of safety precautions, not that it was created by the Chinese government. The rant continues like this for nearly 10 minutes. It's a fire hose of misinformation. And by 10 minutes in, it's spiraling into madness as a few seconds of video of Joe Biden not wearing a mask at a restaurant is used as evidence of him declaring himself some kind of grand ruler, as only servants wear masks.
But he didn't wear a mask. Why? Because masks are for servants. And he's the president. He's not a servant.
The official explanation here is that Biden was eating at a restaurant and was in the process of putting his mask back on, having taken it off to eat his food. Something that I am inclined to believe since you can clearly see him holding the mask as he walks. The video was widely circulated on right-wing media as Biden flaunting the rules, but Tucker Carlson takes it even further, saying Biden meant to be filmed to send a message to Americans. A message that, ironically, never would have been heard had not right-wing media figures, like himself, obsessed over it. This clip itself is not a story, but it does offer a wonderful example of how right-wing media takes innocuous footage to concoct a narrative. Biden being slow to put his mask on is now him telling America that he is their God King. And wasn't this whole segment about Colin Powell's death? And now we're talking about how Joe Biden being filmed in a restaurant not wearing a mask for a few seconds means he's crowning himself the Emperor of America? It's almost as if this whole monologue was written independent of Powell's death, and then that part was inserted later to make the narrative seem newsworthy. And one last detail about Colin Powell Carson did eventually share with us also seemed important.
So at the beginning of the show, we told you about Colin Powell. We left out that Colin Powell was suffering from a number of different health problems. But of course, that's the point. The point of vaccinating the vulnerable is so people with other underlying health problems won't die of COVID. But unfortunately, that didn't work in the case of General Powell, and it didn't work for many thousands of other Americans. And of course, that's the point we're making in the first place.
Colin Powell was suffering from multiple myeloma, which compromised his immune system, making the vaccine less effective. An important detail if you're trying to claim that the vaccine itself isn't effective. A detail that completely undermines his entire rant.
A little
which is why it happens
detail
within
there.
25 minutes after the segment is over, just as the show's going off the air. Because this rant was a con, and Tucker Carlson knows it. But that monologue was, believe it or not, the strongest and most convincing one I saw that week. I want to talk about two other ones that show us how things can get really crazy on this show. On October 20th, Tucker Carlson started a show with a segment that had an impressive number of jumps. We started with a statement about how America was changed by the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020.
This really was the pivot point. It was the height of the BLM riots early last summer.
Which turns into a story of how the media lies to people.
MSNBC's explicit editorial policy to lie about what you were watching live, to characterize violent riots as peaceful protests.
And then this moves to a discussion about looting.
The country your ancestors built is on fire, but shut up, because your ancestors also burned it down.
Which pivots to an article about supply chain issues in the US.
The Washington Post just ran this headline, and we're quoting, "Don't rant about short-staffed stores and supply chain woes."
And apparently America is now falling apart.
Don't complain as your life becomes worse and as your country degrades.
This leads to a point about store closures.
You notice the Walgreens is, for example, closed, and so is the CVS, because...
Well, actually, the Walgreens story was a bit misleading. A lot of people were complaining about the whole Walgreens thing in California, I think. Hold on, folks. It didn't work for so many people, thus with my scientific knowledge I've concluded the vaccine is ineffective. It does not work. Clap. Hold on, folks. Thank you for the follow, Sticksman. Appreciate that. So yeah, the Walgreens story. Apparently the Walgreens story is not as clear cut. The Walgreens were already planning to shut down. This was already in the works. It was even discussed with shareholders. It wasn't because they were like shutting down because of what was happening. Yeah, links are disabled for a reason, sir.
Everything in there has been stolen by thieves who've now been redefined as civil rights protesters. Stop complaining, Karen.
And suddenly we're talking about cities being overrun with drug addicts.
Oh, wait a second. There are junkies living in tents right across from your kid's school. Well, they've always been there too. They were there when you were a kid, you just never noticed. Just readjust your expectations. Settle down, Karen.
And there are undocumented immigrant rapists on trains.
Philadelphia last week, several people on a train, they got on the train and then they got to watch as a man raped a woman on the train for minutes.
And Biden's border policy is destroying America.
You want more of this? We may be getting it. Today, Joe Biden's nominee to lead the Border Patrol, a guy called Chris Magnus, sat for his confirmation hearings.
Wait.
Now, it turns out that Magnus...
Wait. Did that incident in the train... Was that an undocumented folk? I still don't know. I still don't know, what that story really was about. I mean, obviously, I don't trust his, assertion of it. Rebecca Watson had a great video about Walgreens. Oh man. Is Rebecca Watson, the YouTuber who, sits in like a red chair? It's incredible how many people believe the utter rubbish this Tucker talks about. Yeah, it's true. But we've got to debunk it. That's the whole point. Yeah, I don't know if it like hurts or doesn't. Specifically with the Walgreens incident, they were planning to close those stores anyways.
if anything, is to the left of Biden, even to the left of Barack Obama on immigration matters.
Did you follow all that? Black Lives Matter is somehow connected to Joe Biden destroying America with immigrants. Or the impression Carlson's audience more likely got that America is being destroyed, and it's Biden's fault. The hows and whys aren't important. The segment isn't designed to be coherent. It's designed to create a vague feeling of fear about the state of America and to direct that fear and possibly anger towards Joe Biden. The segment itself is, of course, filled with misinformation. Take the op-ed from the Washington Post, which Tucker claims is an attack on Americans, telling them to lower their expectations, as if they need to be ready for some kind of socialist hellscape.
Lower your expectations. What did you expect in America? Come on. Bread lines. We've always had bread lines. It's sort of charmingly retro, these bread lines.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, they're called food, what is it? Food banks. Wait, has Tucker never heard of a food bank?
This is the world's first reusable...
Whoa. Oh god, stop it, YouTube. Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, I do remember her. Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen her channel. I gotta take a look at this at another time.
If we read beyond the headline, what the article by Micheline Maynard actually says is, rather than living constantly on the verge of throwing a fit,
YouTube gives me the weirdest ads because I don't give them what they want, which is me clicking on the ads. I'm telling you, they give me the most random ads.
Taking it out on overwhelmed servers, struggling shop owners, or late arriving delivery people, we do ourselves a favor by consciously lowering expectations. Rather than being an attack on Americans, it's a simple plea for Americans not to take their frustrations out on workers who have no control over supply chain issues. Carlson also claims that Walgreens stores in San Francisco are closing because of organized shoplifting.
San Francisco has very few Walgreens or CVS's or stores like that left because they've all been looted by civil rights protesters.
This is contradicted by numbers from the police, which do not support this wave of shoplifting at Walgreens, a narrative common on social media based on a handful of cell phone videos. Walgreens has not only refused to share internal data related to shoplifting with reporters in San Francisco, their parent company, Walgreens Boots Alliance, was forecasting between 150 and 400 store closures by 2024.
Right, that's exactly what I was talking about. That's exactly what I was talking about. They were already planning to close these stores, at least in the case of Walgreens. YouTube ads are tailored, though. Yeah, they are based on what you view, and except I make sure that I give as little information as possible. So eventually, it just tries to give me anything and everything until something sticks, until I click on something, and they're like, yes, this is what ADT likes. But until then. There we go. Yeah, that's exactly what I remembered.
Since 2016, Walgreens has closed 22 stores in San Francisco, and those numbers include the recent story Tucker is responding to, in which Walgreens had announced it was closing 5 stores.
Now, San Francisco has very few Walgreens or CVS's
it's okay,
or
it's
stores
just
like
banter.
that left
No
because they've all
problem.
been looted.
It still has 53 stores operating in San Francisco, a far cry from what Tucker claims. Also not mentioned in this segment is that, in New York City, Walgreens is shutting down 16 stores. I suspect it might have made it into the segment had they found cell phone footage of a black person stealing something, though. Which, by the way, is used to justify the earlier mention of Black Lives Matter, which was about making shoplifting legal, according to Tucker Carlson. It's also interesting to see how Tucker Carlson, who many describe as a populist, parodying the talking points of a corporation like Walgreens, which happily spreads the organized shoplifting talking point to disguise the fact that it had been planning to close stores regardless of this supposed wave of shoplifting. Perhaps Tucker is happily towing this corporate line because it at least lets him demonize black communities. It's the jumps that really make this segment more than misinformation, though. The narrative through line of America's decay is barely held together as Tucker jumps from one sensationalized story to another, and he uses folksy little turns of phrase or rolls up the carrot insult to engage his audience emotionally. This isn't designed to get people thinking about the news of the day. It's designed to rally their emotions against the left. Tucker Carlson's opening stories are so narrative-focused that sometimes he doesn't even need to misrepresent actual news stories. In some cases, he just presents something made up entirely out of nothing. That is so obviously true in the October 21st show. This segment opens with some truly shocking footage released by the Biden administration.
Wow, truly damning footage here. Wow.
Before moving on, I want everyone to take a moment and think about what this video says. And you don't need any deep analysis here. Just think about the events you saw unfold and what they were about. Really ask yourself, does anything seem amiss here? Does this footage reveal some hidden truth? Okay, here's what Tucker thought when he watched that video.
It's like a room full of aliens have gathered to act out this concept they just heard about called happiness. The head alien is a supernaturally strange being called Kamala Harris.
What? Holy yikes. Really? That's what you're going with? Oh my god, that's incredibly giga cringe. CVS has only 20 stores in San Fran and didn't shut any of them down. Piston Nagoya is its current suspect. Thank you for the follow-up, Visali. In the rape on the train, his student visa was expired per Fox and some other networks, so he fits the normal villain illegal immigrant status. Oh. Thank you for the follow, Scroto Gaggins. Scroto Gaggins. I see. Well, okay, perfect. Let me actually put that, oh wait, no, you are able to put links. Okay. Alright, cool.
No one ever explains, walks into a room in the most secure building in the world with a piece of elasticized fabric over her face. Like, that's totally normal. Just another masked birthday celebration. Harris suddenly yells surprise at her own surprise birthday party. Like she's hosting the event for one of her multiple personalities. What the hell is going on here?
I don't know. Are you sure you're okay there, buddy? Are you sure you're okay there, Tucky?
I can answer that question. Harris acted awkwardly during a surprise birthday party, and everyone is wearing masks because of COVID. But Tucker has to pretend this is some bizarre, unthinkable scenario where people are acting in strange and confusing ways that reveal a deep mental rot at the core of the Biden White House. He goes on for several minutes about these videos, making a number of strange points like that no one says gorgeous anymore.
She goes on to use the word gorgeous, a word that no actual human being has used since 1977.
I am completely willing to believe no one calls Tucker.
I love how, like, I still can't get over the massive dehumanization that he uses when it comes to Kamala Harris. I love the dehumanizing language. Like some kind of alien, as in not human. Nice meme.
Tucker gorgeous, but that doesn't mean no one says it.
First of all, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe, and I am ready to work. I am ready to do this with you, for you. I'm just deeply honored, and I'm very excited.
Whoa.
Whoa, indeed. Nearly 6 minutes in, and all Tucker is talking about are these social media posts. He's calling them staged, and even if they are, so what? They're pieces of PR designed to make President Biden and Vice President Harris seem more human and relatable. Much like your grandpa, Joe Biden also doesn't know how to turn off a speakerphone. If these moments are staged, the fact that none of these people are actors should explain the awkward delivery. But to Tucker Carlson, there's something far more sinister. More sinister than North Korean military propaganda.
But what's the message of the Joe and Kamala videos? All your nightmares are real? The people in charge are even worse than you thought they were? Kamala may have seemed kind of fake to you, Joe may have looked a little out of it, but actually, the White House is now telling us, you don't know the half of it.
According to Tucker, the White House is trying to tell everyone that these people are losing their mind or are robots. These are presented as basic readings of these videos and not right-wing spin, and that's what makes it so effective. The phrasing demands the audience accept the basic premise.
Yikes. By cherry-picking cases that fit the bad guys, they want people to fear and think it's horrible, but not the fault of immigration policy. Right. This is Alex Jones' levels of paranoia. Oh yeah, Scroto Gaggins. Have you seen his documentary about January 6th? Indistinguishable from like an Alex Jones piece. Did Tucker Carlson ever form any theories about how Mark Zuckerberg is a lizard person? I have no idea. But it's always really weird, like, I don't know. Right, and how is it the fault of immigration policies if he obtained his visa legally in the first place? He just overstayed his visa. It's all spin. It's all spin.
Just to get to the conspiracy theory, you must believe Joe Biden is senile before getting to the idea that this is a deliberate move by the White House to rub it in everyone's faces. Why they would do this is never really explored. The conspiracy theory is a bonus because the main point here is to reinforce the idea that Joe Biden is senile and that Kamala Harris is some kind of robot. This is 1/3 of the way into this night's commentary, and have you spotted anything newsworthy so far? All we've seen is Tucker Carlson opine about some harmless social media PR posts, but it does get even more intense.
In December of last year, Kamala Harris, who grew up in Canada, a foreign country.
I appreciate the subtle menace Tucker Carlson has when he describes Canada as a foreign country. We usually don't get much credit for how scary we are.
Is this like, is this like the whole Obama wasn't born here 2.0? Holy yikes, dude.
Into Tucker, the White House is trying to tell everyone that these people are losing their mind or are robots. These are presented as basic readings of these videos and not right-wing spin, and that's what makes it so effective. The phrasing demands the audience accept
Canadian
the basic premise just
sleeper
to get
agent.
Conspiracy theory. You must believe Joe Biden is senile.
Oh no, he's not consumed by.
This is a deliberate move by
he's been going down this path for quite some time.
White House to rub it in everyone's faces. Why they would do this is never really explored. The conspiracy theory is a bonus because the main point here is to reinforce the idea that Joe Biden is senile and that Kamala Harris is some kind of robot. This is 1/3 of the way into this night's commentary, and have you spotted anything newsworthy so far? All we've seen is Tucker Carlson opine about some harmless social media PR posts, but it does get even more intense.
In December of last year, Kamala Harris, who grew up in Canada, a foreign country.
I appreciate the subtle menace Tucker Carlson has when he describes Canada as a foreign country. We usually don't get much credit for how scary we are. Tucker is really shocked at how brazen a lie Harris told was, though.
Swore that she witnessed, quote, multiple generations of her family celebrating Kwanzaa, an American holiday that was invented in Long Beach, California, after Kamala Harris was born. Not one word is true, but not one word is believable. Again, it was a prepared statement. It was carefully considered. Didn't even bother to look at a calendar.
Luckily for us, I did look at a calendar. Kamala Harris was born in 1964 in California. The American celebration of Kwanzaa was first held in 1966. So the idea of Kamala Harris celebrating this with her family, including parents and grandparents, as a child seems pretty reasonable. This is likely what she meant when she said celebrating across generations. As for the Canada part, Harris was born in California and moved to Montreal when she was 12. She moved back to the US at 18 to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C. So is it really hard to imagine that between the ages of 2 and 12, she might have celebrated Kwanzaa with her parents and grandparents? Also, Kwanzaa may have started in the US, but it's celebrated in Canada too. And even if it wasn't, there are no Canadian laws preventing American families from celebrating Kwanzaa in Montreal. The segment is nearly 10 minutes through, and it's completely filled with stuff like this. Tucker Carlson reacted.
That's unbelievable. Oh man, the memes write themselves. How is it possible for Fox Channel to have uploading rights on YouTube? Oh, because they pay and they bring views. So yeah, it's good for business. It's good for business. They're an authoritative source. Did you not know? Wasn't Alex Jones banished from YouTube? Yes, and among other platforms. It must be exhausting constantly hawking conspiracy theories. Nah, it's not that exhausting. Especially when you get paid like Tucky does. Heat420 gifting a tier 1 sub to Scroto Gaggins. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity. Appreciate that. Thank you.
To dopey videos released by the White House. This is the news he thinks is worth commenting on. And to make it seem worthwhile, he needs to make it sound as dramatic and scary as possible. He goes as far as to compare it to a cult.
It's kind of nuts when you think about it. These people literally have no idea how absurd they look. And how could they? They live in a tiny, airless cult where everyone pretends that Joe Biden is fully competent and Kamala Harris is a civil rights hero.
Wait. Did any of those segments put Kamala Harris as some type of like civil rights hero? Wait, how did they even get there? How did you even like make that connection? They were just PR stunt videos at best, or I guess at worst. I don't get it. Banish is kind of elusive. You can definitely still find his content. He just doesn't get paid for it now. Oh, he does. Just in the form of Alpha Brain.
It's Jonestown.
And he brings a guest on to tell us that these videos are...
It's Jonestown, says one of the numerous cult priests, Tucker Carlson.
Somehow related to communism.
Is because every part of the system is so corrupt now and rotted with this communist filth.
And that would you think of everyone
yes,
here
yes,
as
yes.
sociopath.
Yes. When in doubt, just vaguely suggest that something communism, and then like his viewers will automatically get scared or triggered.
Paths.
These people are not capable of that kind of shame. It's not in their nature. They are completely lost. They're sociopaths, all of them.
This is literally all this segment is. I suspect that Jesse Keller
says the sociopath on screen.
The interview only went on as long as it did, over 3 minutes, because of how little substance was actually present. I'm genuinely impressed that Tucker Carlson took something as flat and sparse of content, such as PR videos on White House social media, and turned it into a narrative about some kind of Biden cult / Obama's third term.
This is Obama's third term. And these people are picked because they're compliant and hollow.
But this segment, more than all the others, demonstrates what this show does. It takes news stories, or sometimes things that are barely news events, lies about them, and then builds these fantastic narratives of cults and oppression. To oppose the Biden administration isn't to have a political disagreement, it's to be standing against the monstrous sociopaths who want to destroy America. It catastrophizes political reality to such an extreme that the opposition can only be understood as the most dire of threats. And then Tucker will, in the same breath, complain about how the other side is trying to divide us, which is rich coming from someone who uses a video about flowers being delivered to push a narrative about a cult destroying America.
Right. Nice meme. Now I'm getting a ad for a book? What?
The opening segment is Tucker Carlson's show at its purest.
All right. Yeah, Tucker's followers would definitely drink the Flavor Aid. They already are. Oh, yeah, for sure. How is that possible? Isn't the founding principle of communism caring for your neighbors? Well, the thing is, they don't... okay, so they don't understand what those words mean. Or maybe they do, but it sounds scary to their audience, so that's why they use them.
The show does go on for another 20 to 25 minutes after it's over. These are the quick hits, where 5 or 6 different stories are crammed into tiny segments that leave the audience less informed and more afraid. Here's a quick example of a story from the October 18th episode.
In recent weeks, thousands of illegal aliens have been flown from the Texas border into Westchester County Airport in New York on chartered jets.
Presented as breaking news is the story of children being flown from the southern U.S. border to New York. He interviews conservative New York Post columnist Miranda Devine for details.
By the government, they were all unaccompanied children, but several of them did look to us to be males in their 20s, late teens.
Some of the language here should raise some alarm. According to the government, the people...
So they're children... Wait, did anybody catch that? They're children, but also they're 18 to 20? Wait, they're children, but also 18 to 20? And could it be, again, just Arkham Razor, could it be the fact that a lot of these undocumented folks are just being flown to overflow facilities? That's it? They're not like... So let me guess. The narrative that's trying to be spun here is that they're putting undocumented, scary folks in your neighborhood. Is that the narrative?
People being brought to New York are all children, but according to Devine, some of them looked older. The photos used on TV make it tough to tell, but if you look at the New York Post article, there are much clearer photos of these people who are obviously children, as they're significantly shorter than the man who is escorting them. Also, when Devine claims that these flights are coming in the dead of night, that isn't what we're seeing in these photos. According to the article, these photos were of flights that arrived at 9:52 p.m. and 10:49 p.m. There is a record of 2 flights landing at 2:13 a.m. and 4:29 a.m. on August 20th, but these are the only examples offered in the article that might be considered the dead of night. It then describes that these children are being sent to family members, and those without family members are going to an organization called Mercy First, which works with the U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement to find kids who have been granted refugee status safe homes. These brief few minutes are used to illustrate that the Biden administration is somehow breaking the law, and that it needs to offer greater transparency on where refugee children are being sent.
Yeah, no, exactly, Pat Rad. I was wrong. You were correct, I think.
Well, they never really say why. Tucker does mention that some kind of federal law is being violated, but he doesn't say which one. And the only evidence of something nefarious going on is that some of these flights might be past the bedtimes of these children. They can't come out and say what they want their audience to think because that wouldn't be as safe as the dog whistle they're using instead. This is a segment designed to portray refugee children as a danger to America.
Right.
Tucker Carlson Tonight crams in 5 to 6 of these segments every night in its second half. Much like the opening segment, they're rife with conspiracy theories such as vaccines for military personnel being used to get Christians out of the military.
So by forcing this, you get to find out who sincerely believes in God, and then you know their names at that point, and then you can expel them using the pretext of the COVID vaccine.
UFOs going after American nukes.
UFOs interacted with nuclear weapons platforms and either rendered them inoperable or took them offline.
The content matters less than the general feeling.
What? Right, you're correct, Heat. What? This is literally... this is indistinguishable from a segment on InfoWars. This is literally indistinguishable.
These segments create to distrust any mainstream narrative and to believe any story Tucker is telling you, no matter how outlandish. All these different topics, particularly the ones that are highlighted in the second half of the show, are a means to maintain talking points that aren't necessarily the hot topic of the moment, such as critical race theory or affirmative consent on college campuses. The vague general threats of non-white people and feminism is kept alive in the minds of viewers whenever stories like these are referenced. It also gives them the appearance of legitimacy, as if these are ongoing issues that need to be monitored rather than completely fabricated stories that are simply maintained by a dedicated right-wing media, to ensure that the audience doesn't forget that, even though they're not the topic at the moment, sometime in the future, this is a group we might need to scapegoat again. So while the big monologues get a lot of the attention, including in this video, these smaller segments really add up to something truly nefarious. The impression that these right-wing narratives are part of a persistent worldview, one that can be maintained in the minds of viewers through constant attention, not through big tentpole stories. These segments typically include short interviews, often not running for more than 2 or 3 minutes. They make a perfect backdrop for how Tucker Carlson presents stories on his show. Typically, there are 4 reasons why a news program might include an interview. The first is to provide additional information to a story. In his October 21st episode, Tucker Carlson had a short 4-minute segment on a memo issued by Attorney General Merrick Garland directing the FBI.
Yeah, we absolutely live in a Onion article. Reality is just about... in reality has just become one giant Onion article day after day. Right, Christians are so oppressed in this country that they control a good amount of power, actually. The UFO thing is spooky, but immigrants are not spooky. Yeah, like, I don't know. It could be nothing. Remember, UFO just means unidentified flying object. I'm not even sure if they were able to confirm those reports. It was a testimony from a guy, from what a guy, some person saw, right? From the general or admiral or flight person, whatever. It literally could be anything. Oh, I don't know what a UAP is.
FBI to investigate the increasing number of violent threats towards school board members over COVID-related safety requirements, fears over critical race theory, and other culture war narratives popularized on right-wing media. These threats are very real, as there are several videos that can be found of school board meetings being disrupted by crowds of angry parents who use incendiary language, including death threats.
Have you yourself received death threats?
I have.
Yeah, so, like, this idea, this narrative, or this, like, this narrative that, like, they're just targeting innocent parents is nonsense. Bro, if you're stalking school board members, if you're sending them death threats, which, by the way, happened in this county, too, then, yeah, you're going to be investigated. What do you mean? Do we just, like, allow, like, death, do we just allow, like, death threats and stalking to be okay? It's one thing if you're making up a stink about something you don't agree with. Whatever. It's another thing to stalk elected members of your local community. It's another thing to send death threats to elected members of your local community.
It's terrifying.
It has an effect on you that you can't really put into words. When someone describes the way they want to coming to your home and your life.
Here's another example of parents upset that their kids might be expected to wear masks at school. The threats have gotten so bad that the National School Boards Association has requested help specifically from the FBI. But this isn't the part of the story Tucker Carlson shares on his show, according to Carlson.
Right, and I think there was a segment where he was saying like, oh, even the Postal Service security. Did you know that the Postal Service has a security or law enforcement element? Yeah. No kidding, Sherlock. Because these people are receiving death threats via mail as well. So, yeah. Jesus Christ.
The controversy here is that Garland did not disclose that his son-in-law runs a company called Panorama Education, which has a nefarious intent.
Panorama makes a ton of money pushing racist propaganda, the kind that parents are complaining about.
And how does Panorama Education do that? By creating surveys for children that measure their school experience. He brings on Azra Nomani to provide the evidence.
They are asking children from Hawaii to Maine what about their sexuality, their gender, and they're also asking these questions of their parents.
Not being someone who trusts anybody who wears a shirt that says they aren't a domestic terrorist, which is exactly what a domestic terrorist not wanting to be discovered would do, I decided to look into these surveys myself, which are helpfully posted on Panorama Education's website. Although there are multiple surveys, I couldn't find a single one asking kids about their sexuality. There was one question about gender identity, though. It dared to ask a child, what is your gender? But other than that, there wasn't anything else on sex and gender that I could see. There were definitely questions about race and culture, though, specifically on pages 28 and 29 out of 56, that asks kids in grades 6 through 12 questions such as, how often do teachers encourage you to learn about people from different races, ethnicities, or cultures? And another one is, how fairly do adults at your school treat people from different races, ethnicities, or cultures? Not exactly what I would call nefarious, and perfectly fitting in a survey that also asks kids, how much support do the adults at your school give you? And how confident are you that you can complete all the work that is assigned in your subject class? Merely asking a question about race is, according to Nomani, indoctrinating kids with critical race theory. These types of interviews that add additional information to a story are surprisingly rare, though. Other interviews you might see on Carlson's show are ones that add emotional context, such as when a news event impacts a particular group. Interviewing someone from that group puts a human face on the issue, providing emotional context. We'll have some better examples of that later on, but the closest version of this I saw on Tucker Carlson Tonight was when the show discussed the recent Dave Chappelle Netflix special and the backlash over his comments about the trans community. Tucker Carlson interviewed Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee, apparently for his response as a comedian. Another type of interview you might see on Tucker Carlson's show is someone with an opposing viewpoint, something that has happened in the past but did not happen on the week I watched, and from what I can gather, doesn't happen all that often on the show in general, particularly after Carlson made the mistake of inviting on Dutch historian Rutger Bregman.
You might not like it, but you're a millionaire funded by billionaires, and that's the reason why you're not talking about these issues.
That was a classic meme.
Yeah, only now. Come on, you jumped the bandwagon. You're all like, oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah. It's not very convincing, to be honest.
Honestly, if I ever get the chance to be speaking to someone like Tucker Carlson, I want it to go down exactly like that. The type of interview that is, by far, the most common on Tucker Carlson Tonight is the supposed expert who comes on to affirm everything Tucker Carlson has been saying, giving it the illusion of authority. Examples of this are, well, more than I can fit in this video. Here's one I enjoyed, though. In the October 18th episode, Tucker had a brief segment about an interview with Christopher Steele, whose dossier included a number of accusations toward President Trump. Perhaps most notably the one where there's apparently a tape in Vladimir Putin's possession of women who Trump hired to pee on a bed that Obama had slept in during his trip to Russia. This segment itself is a rehashed complaint about how the investigation into those supposed Russian connections unfairly hamstrung the Trump administration's foreign policy. And to discuss this, Carlson brings on Kash Patel and Devin Nunes. Patel and Nunes add very little of substance in their interview. They vaguely allude to their own personal issues, but the interview lasts less than 3 minutes, giving the men only moments to answer 3 questions between the two of them. Their primary purpose seems to be to agree with Tucker about everything, and then deliver zingers like this one.
This guy is no hero. He is no James Bond. He's Inspector Gadget on Sudafed, and now he's crying for the world to love him.
Maybe he can get a job with the Babylon Bee. These interviews are by far the most common ones I saw during the week I watched this show. Figures who show up, nod along with everything Tucker Carlson said, and then make a quick exit, used to cap off a segment as if it now has an authoritative stamp of approval.
Right.
That's what Tucker Carlson gets from these brief interviews. But I imagine the guests themselves get to expose themselves to Tucker's massive audience and be presented as a friendly face they can trust, because they agree with the same nonsense Tucker Carlson spreads on his show. These are the interviews Tucker Carlson only conducts on his Tucker Carlson Tonight program. There are other sources for people to get their Tucker fix. And in the case of Tucker Carlson Today, it's a long-form interview show that airs on the Fox Nation streaming service. While short segments of these interviews find their way onto Tucker Carlson Tonight, the full 50-plus minute interviews are exclusive to Fox Nation. It's here where Tucker Carlson really digs into the thoughts and opinions of his guests. not like the snippets we see on his Fox News show. And as you might have guessed, Tucker's guests also enjoy agreeing with him. To be fair, these interviews are absolutely in the first category of the ones I outlined above, as these new guests provide lots of new information relative to the narrative being offered. Though ultimately, these discussions support the same kind of narrative Tucker Carlson pushes on his main show, conservative conspiracy theories.
They're just willing to, he just brings on, like, confirmation bias, is the summation of that. Confirmation bias.
Before diving in, I should note that while this show typically airs 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Tucker Carlson took October 22nd off, so I only have 2 episodes to work with. Though for the sake of my own sanity, that was an hour of Tucker Carlson I was spared. The first of the 2 interviews was with Elbridge Colby, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development at the Department of Defense during the Trump administration. He's a peculiar guest, at least for a friendly interview, considering how much of Tucker Carlson's branding is that he stands up to the elites and insider types of Washington. When the interview starts, Tucker tries to establish that Colby definitely isn't one of those people.
If you scour the foreign policy establishment in Washington, everyone's either implicated in the disasters we're watching now, or there's some kind of crazed neocon ideologue who you would not ask to babysit your children because they're that untrustworthy. So there are very few people whose opinion matters, from our perspective, on this topic, and Elbridge Colby is one of them.
From Colby, our perspective, having some sense of the show he's on, tries to do the same by claiming to have been against the war in Iraq.
But yeah, then I've been working in kind of the national security area for the last 20 years. I entered DC as a very junior guy right around the time of the Iraq fever before the war. And I'd say that kind of set me in one direction because I was not a fan. I mean, my opinion didn't matter at all at that time.
A quick look at Colby's bio revealed that he was part of the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq in 2003, which was set up by the Bush administration to help reshape the country, and was also plagued by insider grooms from Washington, something extensively written about in the 2006 book Imperial Life in the Emerald City, Inside Iraq's Green Zone, by Rajiv Chandrasekaran. Being part of the authority that was reshaping Iraq in 2003 is a curious place to be for someone who didn't support the war. After his time in Iraq, Colby continued to work in government for a number of years, and before joining the Trump administration was part of the Center for a New American Security, a think tank that is partially funded by a number of defense contractors and, of course, the US government. He's on Tucker Carlson's show to talk about the looming threat of China and how a military response might be the only option. In short, Colby seems like one of the Washington insiders that Tucker claims to have some deep resentment for. But as we learn in this interview, Carlson and Colby are friends, and Colby has a book to sell. And those things are more important than the facade of Tucker's anti-imperialism.
Right. Remember, folks. Yes, man, there we go. Remember, folks. Gaslight, obstruct, project. That's what it is.
Of this interview is Colby firing off talking points about the danger of China, and he doesn't make a terribly compelling case for his position. Tucker Carlson is very weird in this interview. Although the fear-mongering about China is on brand, his questioning constantly reverts to the talking points he usually has on his show. While Colby is more willing to give the typical answers you'd see from a Washington insider military hawk, Carlson keeps dredging up some of the bogus culture war narratives in response.
The greatest adversary was Russia under Vladimir Putin, and then Biden is elected, and the new Secretary of Defense tells us that the single greatest adversary is in fact within our borders, and it's white men. The U.S. military seems demoralized, and its leadership seems completely distracted by irrelevant concerns like white rage and transgenderism. That's the outsider.
Is there like a source for that?
These questions and comments, and his tactic seems to be to constantly compliment Tucker and his show.
And I applaud your focus on this issue. And any institution that is above accountability will fail. I mean, I think that's a point that you always stress, and I completely agree with it.
Overall, it's not a terribly interesting interview, though I was impressed that even in this dry discussion about American foreign policy, Tucker Carlson still made time to insert some conspiracy theories.
The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, they did Corregidor, the Bataan Death March, they bayoneted nurses in Hong Kong, et cetera, and then we got really, really angry.
Well, that's why Roosevelt allowed it, right? He clearly did. But whatever.
Okay.
I should stress that there is no evidence whatsoever that this is true. I've linked an article from NPR on the subject below if you want to read more about it. And he cranks up some real fear on China by asking what one of their nukes would do to an American city.
Modern nuclear weapons are more powerful. What kind of effect would a modern nuclear bomb have on an American population center?
Tucker Carlson claims to be an anti-interventionist, and someone opposed to the American tendency to push itself into conflicts around the world in an effort to expand or maintain its hegemonic influence. But in this interview, he is reinforcing the very common talking point, something you see in both parties, about China being an existential threat, and discussing the need for a potential military response. It speaks to the game Tucker Carlson is playing, claiming to be a populist speaking for Americans, specifically conservative ones, who have been ignored by the Republican establishment, and then turning around and inviting insiders like Colby on to have a friendly chat about the American military possibly being in an open conflict with China. He does the same thing on Tucker Carlson Tonight when, in the week I watched, he had on politicians, including Senator Josh Hawley and Governor Ron DeSantis for friendly conversations. Tucker Carlson can pretend to be firmly against the neocons who sent the US into Iraq, but the figureheads from back then are gone, and Carlson is happy to play nice with their ideological successors. While the branding of populism may be popular, he'll happily cozy up to politicians he can convince his audience represent their interests, even when they clearly serve a wealthier class.
Turn your home into a modern paradise for just $40 with the new LED light strip that's taking the world by...
Stop it.
It sure is helpful branding, though. The other episode of Tucker Carlson Today I watched was far more on brand. On October 20th, Tucker welcomed Professor Dorian Abbott to talk about how he had recently been cancelled by the woke mob. There is some backstory here. In 2020, Professor Abbott, a geophysicist at the University of Chicago, had some complaints about how diversity, equity, and inclusion groups were impacting the selection process for graduate student candidates and faculty hires. Like all reasonable academics, he voiced his concern via a YouTube video, since taken down, which was responded to by a letter signed by over 100 students, faculty, and alumni calling for the university to allow students to withdraw from his classes without penalty. Ultimately, the university president sided with Abbott, and he faced no administrative disciplinary measures. Of course, this was not why Abbott was brought onto Tucker Carlson's show. Most recently, Abbott co-wrote an article for Newsweek with Stanford Associate Professor Ivan Marinovich, once again voicing concern about the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion, proposing that someone's identity should have no impact for post-secondary admissions. One interesting aspect of this article is that Abbott briefly mentions that his proposal would also eliminate legacy admissions as well, which is the practice of a school, typically seen in elite Ivy League schools, giving students preference if they had a family member who attended the institution. While it's lovely to see this being mentioned, it seems strange that Abbott only mentions it in passing, and it comes off as a defense against people calling him racist. If anything, legacy admissions seem far more unfair, as it doesn't just help individuals from racial backgrounds that typically have privilege, but it goes that extra step of ensuring that someone from an already wealthy family gets special consideration for a spot at some of the best schools in the world.
Right.
So it discriminates based on class as well. Had Abbott come out hard against legacy admissions rather than diversity admissions, we might be viewing him entirely different, but it was diversity that was his main target. In this article, Abbott makes no mention of the research that demonstrates how his field of geophysics is hostile towards faculty that aren't white men, such as himself, and that there are active biases against women and non-white racial groups, and that these diversity programs are designed to undercut that bias by breaking down the systems that prevent inclusion. He also seems unaware that greater diversity within groups creates more novel hypotheses and actually expand research potential, not limit it. Professor Abbott seems to be under the impression that science faculties are untouched by these biases and exist in realms of pure reason, where facts and evidence are all that matter, and a person's identity couldn't possibly impact their work. He seems unaware of the academic research that undermined this idea, which is strange because those studies that you saw flash on screen as I was talking about those topics were all included in the letter complaining about him in 2020. It's almost as if he either didn't read them or simply has no interest in acknowledging them. That aside, what probably drew the most attention in this article is this passage towards the end. 90 years ago, Germany had the best universities in the world. Then an ideological regime obsessed with race came to power and drove many of the best scholars out, cutting the faculties and leading to sustained decay that German universities never fully recovered from. We should view this as a warning of the consequences of viewing group membership as more important than merit, and correct our course before it is too late. If Professor Abbott is interested in starting a conversation about university admissions, I'm not sure comparing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to the Nazis is a helpful talking point. Also, there's something truly grotesque about comparing an effort to help marginalized peoples have better access to higher education with the effort from Nazis to keep those groups out of universities. It seems more like the exact opposite of what's going on. Anyone can make grossly reductive points like this. I could say the Allies in World War II were just like the Nazis, because when they were at war, both militaries killed soldiers on the opposite side. But that would be a silly comparison that removes all nuance from the discussion. But maybe Tucker Carlson will bring this up in the interview. Except no, definitely not. We're gonna get stuff like this instead.
I don't think I've ever seen a college professor lay out in such clear, and I will say gentle terms, as you did, what's at stake.
I'm not sure a Nazi comparison is all that gentle. The rest of the interview goes the way you might expect, with Tucker praising Abbott at every turn and some questionable responses being treated as a matter of fact. For example, Professor Abbott complains about certain ideologies.
I was uncomfortable with ideologies that discourage discourse, because when you can't speak with the other side, the only recourse is violence.
Yes.
And I saw that playing out in the summer of 2020.
This is a weird comment. Obviously, the summer of 2020 refers to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and in other contexts, it could be generously understood as violence in response to an indifferent state that doesn't care about the impact of harsh policing on Black communities and won't have that difficult conversation. But in the context of this interview with Tucker Carlson, it reads more like a condemnation of Black Lives Matter for not wanting to talk about their problems instead of resorting to violence. Putting aside the fact that the violence in BLM protest has been grossly overstated by the media, the only way someone can assume Black people don't want to talk about the violence inflicted upon them by the state is to deliberately ignore that conversation, which has been happening for a very long time and has been conveniently ignored by people such as Professor Abbott. It's a great example of how someone like Professor Abbott was completely ignorant of a problem until it boiled over into a mass movement. And even now, his response is that we need to think even less about the negative impact of the social construct of race. This is not the mindset of someone ready for a conversation, except when it's with Tucker Carlson in a softball interview. The interview muddles along, and I feel like I could spend a whole hour on how so many of these answers are wrapped up in gentle language, but reveal a deep ignorance of the many issues at play. But I want to once again mention how conspiracy theories rear their ugly head. Here's Professor Abbott talking about who's really behind all this diversity stuff.
Oh no. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Is that there's a small group that's extremely committed. You could call them the woke activists or the social justice activists. And they're willing to spend all their time on this stuff, and they sort of steamroll.
And there's some kind of Twitter mob that organizes in this as well.
There's almost like a playbook to try to take someone down who disagrees with the ideology. So the first thing that happens is people go on Twitter and they organize and they write lots of messages about the person. And the messages
I've got to
say
go, mate.
mean
Watching
things.
Tucker's
So they'll
overwhelmingly
say,
cringy.
"This
I
is racist,
don't blame
bigoted,
you.
white supremacist."
Appreciate
Like,
you hanging out,
scary
my
sounding
friend.
things.
The idea that some people have genuine criticisms of him and are simply responding to his words doesn't seem to occur to him. He just waves it away as some kind of conspiracy to advance the Fourth Reich. This interview isn't strictly about the Newsweek article getting some criticism, though. Professor Abbott is a victim in all of this because he was about to deliver a guest lecture at MIT, but was disinvited because of the blowback of that article. Abbott's response is slightly telling in this interview.
Only the top people in the field are invited to do this. You give a large public lecture for like 500 people, and then you visit the department at MIT.
About your research?
About a outreach level of your research.
It sounds like this lecture was a big deal, but what is this outreach level comment? It turns out that this lecture at MIT was intended not strictly for faculty or university students, but also for high school students. Robert Vanderhilst, head of MIT's Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences Department, clarified in a statement. The Carlson lecture isn't a scientific talk for fellow scientists. It has a very specific format and public outreach component, seeking to build public understanding of climate science and to inspire and engage with area high school students. We felt that with the current distractions, we would not be in a position to hold an effective outreach event. I made this decision at my discretion after consulting with faculty and students in the department, and knowing that some might mistake it as an affront on academic freedom, a characterization I do not agree with. Though this particular lecture was cancelled, MIT did invite Professor Abbott to give another lecture, this one instead with faculty and university students. This isn't a case of someone being cancelled, it's a case of someone's lecture being rescheduled. But that's not the narrative we see on Tucker Carlson's show.
It's a way to cripple someone's scientific career and put pressure on them not to speak out.
I don't know how speaking to high school students would mean more for his career than presenting his research to practicing academics. But there's one more aspect of this interview that was very informative. After Abbott had that letter written about him in
Yikes. So this is how Tucker pushed my already biased on into a full-blown racist. Well, like, the thing is, like, if you already have these predispositions, Tucker provides you what you want.
2020, the minor controversy that followed drew the attention of many supposed free speech groups. Apparently, Abbott suddenly found himself networking with a number of different groups and individuals ready to champion his cause. That the worst thing that happened to him was a letter didn't matter. They welcomed him into their fold.
I was already a part of the Heterodox Academy. I got involved with FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. I met with some of the leadership at ACTA, the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. I started networking and trying to understand what had happened and how I can be effective.
He unironically calls this a group of classical liberals, and even mentions how they set up a little safe space for themselves.
They have controversial speakers, and it's only faculty who attend by invitation only. So everyone can trust who's there.
And as is typical with these conversations, we see Tucker Carlson and Professor Abbott pat themselves on the back for having a conversation, even though they might disagree on some stuff.
And you speaking to me is not the same as ratifying all of my different crazy opinions, which you may disagree with, but that's the point.
If you didn't talk to everyone you disagreed with something on, you wouldn't talk to anyone.
Right.
It's like this program turned into an episode of The Rubin Report, where the hapless Dave Rubin happily nods along with whatever right-wing ghoul he's invited onto his show. Only in this case, it's a bit more sophisticated, with Tucker Carlson bringing on a sympathetic face to advance similar talking points, and he's actually capable of marching to the same beat alongside with them, instead of vacuously nodding his head like Dave Rubin. I hate how hollow the whole comment about how they can disagree about things, but still talk to one another. At no point in this interview did the two of them have any sort of meaningful disagreement about anything. It's the same line Dave Rubin would have about not having to agree with all his guests. If there is no active airing of these disagreements, in this case Tucker Carlson doesn't even bring them up, then this is just platforming ideas with no pushback. The invisible disagreements don't matter because they're not talking about them. Right. These are two people who agree about everything they're discussing in this interview. Their disagreements could be about fundamental policy issues or what kind of potato chip they like to eat. It doesn't matter. We don't see it. Professor Abbott not only faced the horror of having his MIT lecture rescheduled, he was also rewarded with an additional lecture at Princeton, which so far has over 10,000 viewers registered, which is a lot more than the 500 he expected at his first MIT lecture. The interview ends on an optimistic note that really reinforces the idea that this man has, in no meaningful way, been cancelled. That there is an entire apparatus ready to make him the next darling of the free speech crowd. He might make the rounds on exclusively right-wing shows, talking about the left being out of control.
Right, and also running to groups that exclude and vet specific members to speak at. Yeah, gotcha. I mean, the love of money is a powerful drug. True, actually.
And if he plays his car right, maybe he'll get a job at the Blaze. Or maybe we'll never hear about this guy again, because, to be perfectly honest, guys like this have limited appeal. They're tools to talk about the phantom menace of cancel culture. It's really just the media-savvy ones who can parlay that into a career. I don't know if this guy has it in him for that. Remember when I said about how I got lucky that Tucker took Friday off? Well, that luck ran out when I learned that he also dropped an extra bit of content onto Fox Nation, one of his monthly Tucker Carlson originals. This one titled Blown Away, The People vs. Wind Power. As you might have guessed, it's about how wind power is a threat to America. This 25-minute special, which calls itself a documentary, is so thin and cheesy, I struggled to take it seriously. It's lavishly produced and leans very heavily on interviews that give emotional context to the supposed threat of wind power. That's the second type of interview I mentioned above. The vast majority of subjects are either regular people or activists upset that wind turbines have been or are being built near them. Here's an example.
People who look at some of these wind proposals figure out quickly that one of the reasons their community is being targeted is it's poor and they're perceived as being desperate for revenue.
This sure seems like a case of the little guy being trampled by big business. So let's see who we meet first.
The consequence of this affluent NIMBYism is that the high cost of green energy falls on poorer places, places like rural Iowa, home to Mike and Tanya Lamb.
The high cost? Wait, the high cost? That's actually the opposite. Wind and solar are one of the cheapest ones. And furthermore, that's a McMansion. That's not a poor person. That is literally a McMansion, complete with ATV vehicles. Hey, Silver Knight Dragon. Hey, Misinformation. How's it going?
I'm not sure what property values are like in Iowa, but there is no way that anyone living in that home is one of the poor and desperate described earlier. Tanya Lamb, who lives in the house, literally calls it her dream home.
It is our dream home.
The special is a collection of shots of windmills breaking up otherwise flat scenery. And if you're guessing many of these complaints about windmills is that they will ruin the view, you'd be right.
In 2019, the wind farms came.
This is our view from our dinner table.
The wind farms came.
Turbines.
Because this is what I want to see outside my window. Because this is what I want to see. What do you mean they only have 16 bedrooms? No, I have no sympathy either. It's just a meme. Yeah, it's really it's not a big deal. Trust me. Some people would rather have a view with no obstruction versus a livable planet, true. But yeah, anyways, this is so much better. I would rather have this.
Every direction.
And we get a lot of shadow flicker in here too.
I mean, just imagine being in a room and someone's turning the light switch on and off, on and off, on and off.
Oh no.
I mean, and it's in the middle of the
Oh,
day.
no.
Well, it's actually in the morning is when it's the worst. And it almost makes you dizzy.
There are some other assorted complaints, like the wind turbine creates a lot of noise, and the only time we hear noise from a turbine is when we get one of these weird close-ups where audio is almost certainly being manipulated.
Our peaceful country living.
That isn't to say that these things are completely silent, and I suppose whatever noise might be generated is annoying. Anyone can find plenty of these complaints online, but a problem with this criticism is that it's couched in the idea that these wind turbines are in rural areas because people in cities don't want the burden that comes with building them. That is, supposedly the noise they create. As someone who currently lives in a city, that is
right. Like, wait. So the idea, the criticism is that they make too much noise, which is dubious claim to begin with, but that the cities don't want them because it would make too much noise in a city. Okie dokie, makes sense.
Is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. As I type this, I can hear a plane flying overhead as it approaches the city's airport. 30 minutes ago, there was a siren as an ambulance drove by, and a few days ago, I spent most of the day listening to a construction crew repair a water main down the street from me. We get noise in the city. The occasional whooshing noise would not be a big deal. The reason you don't see a lot of wind turbines in cities is because they're more effective in wide open spaces, such as coastal areas or open plains. If you live somewhere like a flat part of Iowa, that's what makes it an attractive spot for a wind turbine. Wind isn't nearly strong enough when a turbine is surrounded by buildings. We get some laughable complaints about how subsidies are used to create wind farms.
Wind farms only exist because they're heavily subsidized by politicians with your money.
Oil and gas only exist because politicians subsidize them with your money. Fixed it for you.
They wouldn't exist otherwise.
There's no mention at all of subsidies that go towards fossil fuel companies.
Yeah. Oh man, the memes write themselves with this one. Yeah, so one thing that you can't like really catch me off guard on is the issue with climate change. And yeah, nice meme.
This is where the special really drops the ball. Any discussion about energy needs would of course mention that there is always a cost associated with them, both financial and environmental. And while wind turbines have one, comparatively, their cost is lower than that of fossil fuels. An article in Nature describes the amount spent on fossil fuel subsidies as more than triple what is spent on renewables like wind energy. It's irresponsible to discuss these subsidies without presenting that context. But it certainly doesn't end there. What really annoyed me in the special is when it got personal, and Tucker tried to use the birds to push his agenda.
From the federal government and other studies that show that hundreds of thousands of birds are killed every year by wind turbines.
While I believe that number may or may not be true, I think that like in the grand scheme of things, you can fix that by, I believe, just using different color paint, and also like it is infinitesimal compared to, say, I don't know, leaving your cat outside for a long period of time. Feral cats and outdoor cats kill way more birds. Correct, Pat Rat.
Again, a comparison needs to be made here. Every year, far more birds are killed by power lines, buildings, and cats than wind turbines.
There we go. Thank you. See, it's like I've already watched this before. No, I have not.
We're going to reduce this discussion to energy production. Fossil fuels are driving climate change, which will, and does, have a dramatic impact on bird habitats, devastating populations, and threatening entire species with extinction. This isn't to say that we shouldn't consider birds when building windmills, particularly species that are more likely to be impacted by them. And this can be addressed by considering migration patterns and habitats when it comes to placing windmills. But climate change is by far the bigger threat. And if someone truly cares about the birds, fossil fuels are a much greater danger to birds than windmills. There is very little to comment on in this special. We spend some time with a fisherman.
Not only that, there's significant advances when it comes to the wind turbine technology, where you can just put them out into sea. You just put them out into sea and save space too. Oh, you only have to paint one of the blades differently. Gotcha. I've passed farms that had signs say vote yes for the windmills before. Huh. For some local elections. Vote yes for windmills. Nice.
And worried about his business failing because of wind turbines that haven't been built yet. And activists who say that wind turbines would mean New York has changed its political composition.
This state, it's not a democracy, it's a socialist republic.
Oh, it might be fun to just dunk on these people providing evidence that building windmills around water typically has no meaningful impact on fish populations, or when this guy holds up a map to demonstrate that New York State would never build wind turbines near New York City, is completely contradicted by the fact that there is the Empire Wind Project, an offshore wind farm being built right next to New York City that is planned for completion in 2026. Ultimately, this is the smallest of potatoes being presented. The previous Tucker Carlson original special to air was about UFOs. If you're in a series that includes a special about the dangers of UFOs, I hate to break it to you, but you're not on a serious program. And so we come to the end of our odyssey through the many programs of Tucker Carlson. And
I mean, again, this is indistinguishable from Alex Jones. I would be annoyed by wind farms if they didn't have battery stations for storing excess power. True. Right, fossil fuels are patriotic. Abraham Lincoln.
This was all from a single week. What I found most surprising about this venture was how diverse Tucker's talking points were. He truly had something for everyone. He had conspiracy theories of all flavors. He had racism. He had sexism, transphobia, anti-Semitism, neocon, republicanism, and religiosity. Part of my research included trips to the Facebook page for Tucker Carlson Tonight, where clips of the opening monologues were often shared, and the comments were completely uninteresting. Some, I guess I'll call them highlights, include, "If we the people want to keep our freedom, we must stand up and not submit to the mandates. We must push back. We must ask the one and only true God to have mercy on us and shine the light of truth on the evil being played out right in front of us." No wonder the left hates Tucker Carlson. He mops the floor with them every single night. With the exception of the Colin Powell monologue, which sparked a bit of debate between those who respect his position and those who hate his disapproval of Donald Trump, the comments are mostly filled with screeds against Democrats and adulation for Tucker. No one is watching the show critically. They're coming here to have their biases served. This observation, I imagine, will shock no one, nor will my debunking of Tucker Carlson's content.
That's exactly what I said earlier.
The program has long been understood as a pack of lies used to push far-right talking points. But by watching it for a week, what surprised me was how artificial it all felt, so obviously rehearsed. Here's a quick example.
Like white privilege, family privilege is an unacknowledged and unearned benefit instantiated, if that's even a word, these people are so stupid, instantiated in U.S. laws, policies, and practices. Just write like an American.
For the benefit of Tucker, according to Oxford, instantiated means to represent as
okay,
or by an instance. It's the little examples like these that exemplify or instantiate the somewhat folksy attitude Tucker presents on his show, much like the rolled up sleeves and wood paneling on his Today program, or the photo ops he does in his definitely real and not at all staged cabin-esque room. Tucker Carlson's audience have bought into this fiction of him being a man of the people, even though he comes from a wealthy background and continues to make millions on Fox News, pushing hollow narratives designed to misinform and distract his audience from the fact that he, and people like him, are actively working against their interests. It speaks to the problem of personalities in political commentary. People aren't tuning in for the news, they're tuning in to see Tucker. He gives them a version of the world they want to believe in. So they
Right. So, and again, just to be clear, this guy isn't news. We'll see about the thing adding batteries to all windmills, increase raw material demands, and their energy generation is usually used immediately as a supplement for lack of other generation from natural fuels, which we just simply need more wind farms. Yeah, and I think we have more than enough space, and especially with new technology that as I think it was the section that was just shown about expanding it out to sea should be just fine. Opinion as argued in court, no reasonable person would take Tucker as anything other than opinion. That's right.
First they're thinking to him, and he shapes the news of the day into a version that confirms their biases. Whether it's distracting them with bogus stories about menacing refugee children, or misinforming them about vaccines that will save their lives. The objective is to rile people up and make them angry with empty narratives, and then direct them towards Republican politicians who will devote more money to the military and undermine projects that might benefit the American people. The interview with Rutger Bregman summed it up perfectly when he called Tucker Carlson a millionaire working for billionaires, and that is why that segment never saw the light of day on
Thank you for the follow comment.
And we only have evidence since Bregman recorded it himself. Tucker Carlson needs that facade to keep this whole thing going. It's not about standing up to the powerful elites, it's about distracting the people with nonsense so they don't notice those same elites exploiting them. That is what Tucker Carlson does with his programming each week. This one was quite a ride. Tucker Carlson's show really spins your head around.
Yeah, great breakdown. Super props to Jose. Excellent. We need more wind farms in Antarctica. Penguins can't even fly. Keep your government hands off my Medicare. There should be a law that says all opinion-based coverage of news must have a disclaimer. Yeah, like a fairness doctrine. Lithium, cobalt, and other precious metals are costly and very labor unfriendly to mine, process, etc. That's correct. But I believe we're getting better. Spread it forward. I believe we're getting better with that technology, and also there are possibilities that could be explored to make sure that these things are done in a closed loop system. To lessen that, to lessen exactly what you're talking about, spread it forward. But without the significant funds, without the ability to get things off the ground, it all just keeps, the consistent narrative just keeps making it seem like it's all just one big pipe dream. But didn't he already win a lawsuit because no reasonable person would believe Tucker was telling facts? Right, exactly what Memo for the Record was saying, exactly. We can also just not exploit laborers. That's also true. But the main problem, because we can fix that, but the main problem is like how we process these precious metals. We can probably do better. And I think we can also use alternatives to spread it forward's point. Where are these reasonable people? Because a lot of people believe him. Well, those would be the unreasonable people. And when you start to think about it and start to think about how massive his audience is, things start to get a little bit scary, don't you think? New batteries will not need cobalt, and there are new companies being founded to recycle lithium batteries to reclaim the materials for new batteries. Right, exactly what I was talking about, a closed loop system which attempts to address these type of issues. Exactly, Silver Knight. You just kind of expanded on it. But yes, that's what I was alluding to. Right. It starts to get, it starts to get a little scary, don't you think? Or very scary. Let's counter by growing ADT's following. True. That's right. Make sure you follow, do the YouTubes, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that awesome stuff. More importantly, spread the word far and wide that this is the chillest place to be for news and politics. Your shift's up, isn't it? It almost is, but we've got enough to finish off. I get to work in 20 minutes-ish. About 20 minutes. So, we've got, we can do it. We can do it. For a cute animal video, now's your chance. I got you. Don't worry about it.
Orders in, and I heard this guy screaming at me. What's your name? Huh? You're cute.
Aww.
I bet you. Oh, you're just a little kitten. Yeah, let's get you to somebody.
Morning. Movember is a men's health initiative. Every year, my buds and I have gotten together. We've tried to raise money.
Just checking in. Roads for days.
There's a bunch of little initiatives of what everybody can do to help engage a little bit more, and one of them was a 60-kilometer hike.
Guess we're taking another little detour today.
That's when I came across this guy just screaming.
I don't think that 60 kilometers is in me, but we're gonna call you kilometer 10.
Just immediately, he just kind of captured my heart.
Aww.
I think we'll find you a home yet. Yeah? You want to come home with me?
This year was a little bit different for me. In the last 15 months, my best friend was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was only 40, and my grandpa, he passed away in February to cancer as well.
So he's hitching a ride. I'm on my way back. Gonna jump in the car, and then we're gonna go find his owners. A couple possibilities of what farm it might be. But they're kind of few and far between, so quicker just to go back, get him into some warmth. He's holding on for dear life. Yeah, hi buddy. I held him in my arms, and yeah, he just climbed right up my side. It's kind of like a parrot. Should call you Polly. He wanted to walk.
Sometimes he'd want to be down on the ground, so I put him down, but he would follow me.
What should I call him? I can't name him yet. I gotta find his owner. If I name him, I'll get attached to him, you know? I'm holding it off. What got me to that morning, that hike, was obviously some personal events in my life that were negative that I was kind of trying to turn into a positive, and things that were going on in his life, obviously, over the 4 days while he was out in the wild and just trying to survive when it was minus 20.
The day he went missing, there was a massive snowstorm that night. They looked high and low everywhere for him, all around the farm, really upset. And after 3 days, they kind of just figured maybe a coyote got him or something. They had this little daughter. They got a new kitten right away because she was so upset.
Aww.
Mr. Mo, who was my favorite, Hitch has overtaken Mr. Mo now. Fate intervened. Just wanted a happy home for this guy.
That's what this guy is. He is just a reminder that where you start out and where you end, you really don't have any control over. You just gotta roll with the punches and keep an open and positive mindset to everything. There's a view up there. Yeah.
Like,
Aww.
comment, and subscribe.
Well, at least he got saved. Makes me sick how people do that to kitties. Yeah, like, imagine, I mean, how could you not... Well, I mean, it's a snowstorm. Why would you leave the little kitty outside? How? That makes no sense. How's it going, Darknet? Oh, man. But, at least this dude found him. And, at least he has a home with a person who actually, cares. A lot of them lose their ears in the cold. Yikes. Yikes. Poor little dude. Alright, so we're gonna run through the gauntlet on the final, a company called Atlas Energy is working on its way to create portable batteries spent from spent nuclear fuel. That's news to me. Interesting. Yeah, like I said, there's always like different there are ways to make things better in terms of battery technology, you know? So we're gonna try to speed run through this. Prince Harry said he warned Twitter CEO about the January 6th Capitol riots. Prince Harry said that he warned Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey that his platform is allowing a coup to be staged before the attack on January 6th. So in other words, I don't know whether or not this was verifiable. He's claiming that he sent an email to Jack Dorsey, but the point of this is to kind of illustrate just how public and how out there the information was. This wasn't just some random event. This wasn't just some like, oh oops, it was just in the heat of the moment. Time and time again, multiple accounts continued to confirm the idea that this wasn't just some type of heat of the moment kind of deal, right? You would expect them to go in, but sometimes the little buggers get to explore too much and get lost. You can't find them to bring them indoors. Yeah, but like you're the pet owner. You are responsible for that animal. So I would argue that you got to do everything you can to make sure. Especially if you have like a big property, then you better make sure. Especially if you know a farm, I would assume that you know or you're paying attention to the weather. Especially if you're like on a farm. So then, like, the idea would be, like, hey, there's going to be some really bad weather coming, or we expect bad weather, so we should probably make sure that we have, we make sure we have our ducks in a row. And that just kind of live around. We didn't exactly own them, but they just showed up. No, I mean, like, that was a literal pet of theirs. It wasn't like a wild cat. It was like or I should say like a feral cat. It was their kitty. It was a kitty cat. It wasn't like a cat that just happened to show up around the farm or anything like that. Yeah, exactly. Keep your cats indoors. Or, yeah. Jack and I were emailing each other. I would love to see the DMs being leaked here, so we can get that confirmation. Jack and I were emailing to the prior of January 6th, where I warned him that his platform was allowing a coup to be staged. The email was sent the day before, then it happened. I haven't heard from him since. Right, so again, the TLDR of this, is that it's very public. It's so out there. Using animals for pest control is never a good idea. Yeah, it introduces other problems. We've done this time and time again, where we introduce like a species in an attempt to control X, but ends up it ends up being a catalyst for other problems. Yeah, exactly. And a good example would be like the cane toads. Another example would be like the introduction to oh man, something happened here in Florida. I think it was like the bufo frog. I forget. In an attempt to control whatever, and it just ends up being worse. Yeah. The scent of the cat is enough to keep the house clear. The scent of the cat is enough. Oh, should I put a Jordan Peterson thing that says clean up your room? No, I have an apartment. Trump loses again as U.S. District Judge, denies his emergency request to block records from January 6th committee. So, another L. More information. More information to come, I assume. More information to come, I assume, regarding January 6th. As a totally innocent person attempts to block information that could potentially exonerate him. Plaintiff is unlikely to succeed on the merits of his claim or suffer irreparable harm, and because of balance of the equities and public interest, we are against granting his request relief. The Biden administration has declined a request from Trump's legal team in October asking for President Biden to assert executive privilege over the files. Still, Trump argued to the court that future presidents would suffer sustainable injury or irreparable harm if the documents were disclosed. Now, why is that? That's kind of weird. That's kind of weird. Judge can rebuff Trump's argument, citing past presidents waiving executive privilege when dealing with matters of grave public importance, such as Watergate, the Iran-Contra, and 9/11. She also said Biden, as president, is in the best position to evaluate effects of documents and disclosure would have on the executive branch. True. So yeah, another L. And 16,000 pages are being requested. So definitely more to see in the coming weeks and months about this. I hope that at the end of all of this, we get a good kind of a good summary of what happened in January 6th, kind of compiled and kind of just put there for the public. Oof. To kind of double up on that, Trump Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, Stephen Miller, and other White House officials are subpoenaed for the January 6th committee. House committee probing the January 6th riot on Tuesday subpoenaed former Trump press secretary Kayleigh McEnany, senior advisor Stephen Miller, and other ex-White House officials to testify in the investigation and provide relevant documents. In addition to McEnany and Miller, those subpoenaed include former White House personal director John McEntee, Christopher Lindell, Keith Kellogg, and National Security Advisor, to former Vice President Pence. Other subpoena recipients are Nicholas Luna, who served as personal assistant to then President Trump, Cassidy Hutchinson, who is a special assistant for legislative affairs, Kenneth Klukowski, former senior counselor to Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark, Benjamin Williamson, who served as senior advisor to the White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and Molly Michael, who served as Oval Office Operations Coordinator. The latest round of subpoenas came a day after the same panel issued subpoenas to 6 top Trump allies. In a statement announcing the subpoenas, the committee noted that McEnany made multiple public statements in the White House and elsewhere about purported fraud in November 2020 election. The panel said that the first White House press conference after the 2020 presidential election, McEnany claimed that there was very real claims of fraud that the former president's re-election campaign was pushing, and said that the mail-in voting was something that we have identified as being particularly prone to fraud. Yeah, but what the argument is going to be is, well, at the time, the excuse is going to be, well, at the time, we had numerous reports coming in about that, and that's why we went with it. Maybe he's thinking he can rerun on top of the people he's working with. I don't know. Like any GOP would waste any time handling over dirt regarding a Dem president. Oh yeah, exactly. Right, that's what I'm saying. Like all of these things are totally normal for a person who is totally innocent, who would do everything in their power to block evidence that could exonerate them. In his statement, the panel also noted McEnany was reportedly present at times with the former president as he watched the January 6th attack. Representative Benny Thompson, Mississippi Democrat, who was chairman of the probe panel, said in a statement that the committee wants to learn every detail that went on in the White House on January 6th and in the days beforehand. We need to know precisely what role the former president and his aides played in his efforts to stop counting the electoral votes, and if they were in touch with anyone outside the White House attempting to overturn the outcome. We believe the witnesses subpoenaed today have relevant information, and we expect them to fully comply with the Select Committee's investigation as we work to get answers for the American people, make recommendations on changes to the law to protect our democracy, and help ensure that nothing like January 6th ever happens again. Now, that being said, it is good that we get a full account and kind of get the complete story of what exactly happened, who had bigger roles than originally thought to play. My problems here start where it says recommendations on changes to the law to protect our democracy and help ensure that nothing like January 6th ever happens again. Well, the issue here is we have mechanisms in place already. The problem is they didn't function when they needed to. It's not that they weren't there. It's not that we need to add anything else. It's just that the mechanisms that were supposed to deal with this failed for reasons. We still don't know how it is possible that all the intelligence managed to drop the ball at every step of the way. That being said, this shouldn't be an excuse for expanding executive power or for expanding law enforcement power for the sake of that when they already have the tools that they need. They should have just used them. Monday subpoenas were issued to former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, ex-Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller, lawyer John Eastman, who wrote a controversial memo arguing that Pence had the power to reject the Electoral College victory of Joe Biden during a joint session of Congress on January 6th, which of course he doesn't. Yeah, so TLDR, it's about to get It's about to get It's about to get spicy in the next couple of weeks and months coming up. We'll see who complies with the subpoenas and who doesn't. And well, I'm sure we're going to find out a lot of more information going forward. Senate Republicans harboring visions of securing a majority in next year's midterm suffer a blow on Tuesday when perhaps their most valuable potential recruit, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, said he would not challenge Senator Maggie Hassan. But a year before Election Day, both Republicans and Democrats have reasons to cling to optimism and harbor deep doubts about their chances to claiming control of the U.S. Senate. The GOP path to majority will not be smooth, and Democratic bulwarks are not fully fortified, and a challenging year is ahead for both parties. I'm not convinced of this assessment. I'm not convinced of this assessment. I'm not convinced of this at all. I think the GOP will have a much better advantage. I suspect the GOP has a much bigger advantage. Period. That being said, if this is true, that might be injecting a little bit of hopium. We will see what happens. Wasn't the rally at the White House technically illegal because of the Hatch Act? I don't know, but there was a report about just how many times the Trump administration violated, and the Trump administration and their officials violated the Hatch Act, for sure. It's hard to use those tools when law enforcement sympathizes with the insurrectionists. Well, some certainly did. I believe I heard reports about certain police officers, especially Capitol Police, are under scrutiny. Representative Paul Gosar addresses backlash to violent anime edit, likening the video to symbolic betrayal for a fight over immigration policy. Right. Again, guys, you know, nothing to see here. It's just jokes, or it's not what you think it is. Arizona Representative Paul Gosar, again an elected representative, addressed the backlash to a violent anime edit he posted on his Twitter account, likening the video to symbolic representation of the impending congressional fight over immigration policy. The Arizona lawmaker on Sunday tweeted an edited anime scene depicting a character with his face edited onto it using two swords that slashed the back of the neck of a large character featuring AOC's face. The Attack on Titan parody also featured the Gosar character approaching a figure featuring President Joe Biden's face with his blades drawn. Gosar included the caption any anime fans out there. I love how, like, it's so clear cut to see who they're targeting. This tweet, which has surpassed 3 million views as of Monday, has been removed following outcry from many Democratic colleagues, including AOC herself. In an electing statement released Tuesday, Gosar confirmed that his office produced the video, so it was not only just like a fan edit or anything like that. It was his office. I do not espouse any violence or harm towards any member of Congress or Mr. Biden. The video depicts the fight taking place next week on the House floor and symbolizes the battle for the soul of America when Congress takes up Mr. Biden's $4 trillion spending bill that includes amnesty for millions of illegal aliens. I'm not sure that's true. Already in our country and was not meant to depict any harm or violence against anyone portrayed in this anime. Yeah, except, sure. That's a nice meme. The lawmaker continued to explain the purported symbolism within the minute-and-a-half clip, saying that AOC represents the Democrats' open border amnesty agenda, which, again, is just not a thing. It's just not a thing. In reality, the Build Back Better framework includes a scaled-back immigration policy that advances the registry date for immigrants who have lived here for more than 11 years to apply for permanent residence, as well as provide additional funding to restore the availability of immigrant visas and decrease the backlog of processing green cards. True. So yeah. And it's not 4 trillion to my knowledge. Since Biden took office in 2021, the federal government has maintained public health policy known as Title 42, which allows expulsions of most asylum seekers in the face of the coronavirus pandemic, a far cry from Gosar's alleged open border policy. True. True. So TLDR, that's his excuse. Weren't the Titans the good people in the end? I stopped watching after he left the city. I have no idea. Anyone who likes the fan-headed definitely will not be looking for deeper meaning into it. Right. Like, it's the equivalent of just asking questions. Alright, folks, I do have to get going. We will pick up this one. The mysterious 12k votes, because I'm so glad I waited for this. But we will continue this tomorrow, Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So make sure that on your way out, make sure you hit that follow button, and make sure you hit the like, comment, share, and subscribe on the YouTubes. Do the Discord. Join us here. Join us on the Bird app. Join us on YouTube. As always, please stay safe. Please take care of each other. I love you all, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. See ya! Thank you, Darknet. Appreciate it. Alright, folks. Hang tight. Hang tight. Let's go to Ben's channel. We haven't been there in a while. Cheers, Kalo. Alright, folks. Hang tight with us. We're heading out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go.